Alrighty, hello, welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. Today we have another breakdown of an NFL team revealing our number 28 team in our 2023 to 2024 power rankings. This series is inspired by that franchise, guys. We have our own takes over here, but go check them out. And yeah, obviously we're talking about the LA Rams today, who, just 2 years ago were Super Bowl champs, and now they're in for another really tough season, I think. Um, Obviously, last year everything kind of went wrong. They had a bunch of injuries, and a lot of the holes on the roster really started to show. And I think we're going to be in for another really tough year. So we're going to kind of start by talking about their offseason, kind of what they did, and then we'll start talking about those rosters. Obviously, it starts off with Mike LaFleur. They bring him in over from the Jets. He's the younger brother of Matt LaFleur. To replace Liam Cohen. At the end of the day, it's Sean McVay's offense, so they're kind of in there to help install and kind of bring some sparks to the offense, let alone to actually be the offensive mind. They lose Darrell Henderson, Allen Robinson, which were not, huge losses. Neither of them are amazing playmakers anymore. They bring in Stetson Bennett, Puka Nacua in the fourth rounds, as well as bringing in Hunter Long. They'll kind of get some more talent on offense. They also bring in Steve Avila, draft him in the second round from TCU. And then they're getting Logan Bruce back from injury, who didn't play a single snap last year, to help replace David Edwards. So offensively speaking, you hope that either Steve Avila or Logan Bruce can kind of replace David Edwards. But for the skill positions, they really did not lose much. Allen Robinson or Darrell Henderson, who are not really great players for them last year. So offensively, it's a little bit of a wash. Defensively is where you worried because they lost Greg Gaines, A'Shawn Robinson, Leonard Floyd, Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, David Long, Troy Hill, Taylor Rapp, and Nick Scott. That is a lot of losses to the defense, and they replaced those with Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Akella Witherspoon, and a bunch of other late drafted or undrafted rookies. So you're going to be worried about this defense, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We're going to skip over the coaching staff and just going to go straight into the offense, which obviously does have the potential to go out and win a Super Bowl. But I think they've lost enough pieces from that roster to where I think you'd be happy with a top 10 finish from this unit. I will think you'll probably have kind of a middling offense here, just because you still do have some decent talent and you trust Sean McVay to scheme them up well. But all this is really going to start off with Matthew Stafford and what version that we get from him. Obviously, even in their Super Bowl season, he is a really erratic player. And so week to week, he doesn't always have this amazing high-end consistency to make him one of the true elite quarterbacks in the league, but he's still a really, really excellent quarterback. And last year, I think starting week one, he was not quite fully healthy. And so I think he's more healthy week one this year than he was last year. Yet again, though, still coming off an injury, and he's an older quarterback. So what are we really going to get? Not fully sure. However, I still expect to get anywhere from kind of the seventh to 12th best quarterback play from him. But at the same time, it kind of just depends on some of these players around him and how they perform, because that could really hinder him. Because as we said, he is a quarterback that does have a bit of variance to him week to week. Then behind him, you got Stetson Bennett. He's played a lot of games in college. If Stafford goes down, maybe he can come in for a game or two to maybe try to keep your season alive. However, if he's expected to play a lot of this season, then you might as well just prepare to try to get Caleb Williams at that point. And then you got Brett Rypien behind him, who really cares. Yeah, quarterback, I was saying, I think you'll end up getting top half quarterback play. Just depends on if we get a full 16 or full 17 games from Matthew Stafford. It really just depends on that. And then in the wide receiver core, it's really not great either. So obviously they have Cooper Kupp, who's one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. Is really dominant from the slot. Outside of him, though, Not a whole lot. Um, so obviously we're really excited about Cooper Kupp. Obviously he's coming back from injury, so there is the chance that he will slow down. However, I think he'll be all right, and I think he'll still be an excellent player, and they are going to run this offense, especially the passing game, through him. But outside of that, not a whole lot around him. We'll start off with Ben Skoranek, who's basically just a fullback who plays wide receiver. And then you got Van Jefferson, who's going to be your number 2 wide receiver. Has been okay as a deep threat, but really hasn't taken the steps in development that you're hoping. So what are we going to get from him this season? Um, I think he's going to be solid wide receiver, but I'm not really expecting some huge breakout from him for him to really solidify himself as a great wide receiver. I think he'll be a good wide receiver. I think he'll stay in the league for a while, but I really don't expect him to help create some sort of dynamic passing game. Puka Nacua, who they drafted in the 4th round, has gotten a lot of camp buzz. So maybe he can step up to be your number 2 or number 3 receiving option on this team. Tutu Atwell is a speed guy who hasn't really shown much either. So maybe with more opportunities, he will really break out a little bit more. But he just hasn't shown a whole lot, so I really don't think that's going to happen. Then Demarcus Robinson, just a bigger body outside guy. He's kind of bounced around a lot of teams now. He's there to give him a big body presence, but he's bounced around all these teams for a reason. And then throwing the ball, you also got Tyler Higbee, who's just a pretty decent tight end. Not much to say about him. He's kind of good, not great. They're bringing Hunter Long from Miami, and the athletic tight end who's been in this kind of similar scheme. So he'll know what he's doing, and he'll be a decent little secondary option at tight end for them. More of a receiver than blocker, but he'll still be pretty solid for them. Then they got Davis Allen and Bryson Hopkins below those two. They do run a good amount of 2 tight end sets, so maybe they'll keep all 4. Davis Allen a little bit more of a blocker, Bryson Hopkins a little bit more of that kind of flex athletic tight end that can kind of go and play outside and use his athleticism in the passing game. So overall, when it comes to your weaponry for receiving the ball, you do have a top half unit just because Cooper Kupp is such a great dynamic wide receiver. But if Cooper Kupp goes down, you're looking at a bottom 5 unit. So you're really relying on Cooper Kupp to keep up his production and stay healthy, which I believe he will. But at the end of the day, you're putting all your eggs in the Cooper Kupp basket, which could come back to bite you. You know what I mean? Then running back, I got Cam Akers, who just hasn't quite been the same since I think it was an Achilles injury. That's a really tough injury for running backs who requires a lot of athleticism and explosion. He just hasn't quite been the same guy. Now that he's had some more time and another full off season, maybe he'll come back a little bit stronger. But not the most explosive, doesn't have the greatest vision. He's kind of just a really okay, he's a good, running back. Behind them, they got Kyron Williams, Zach Evans, even Sony Michel is still here, apparently. But it's really Cam Akers' backfield, and you'll get whatever from him. Kyron Williams, I don't see anything from him. So running back room, you might honestly have a bottom 5 running back room. Cam Akers just is not some crazy needle mover like we thought he might be when he first really broke out on this Rams team. Alrighty, so then we pair all of that with an offensive line, which is they have a lot to prove. They were not great last year. Their best piece is going to be Rob Havenstein, who is a really solid right tackle. He's not really threatening to be one of the true elite tackles in the league, but he's still a pretty solid tackle, and you're not really worried about what he's giving you on that right side. And then on the left side, got Joe Noteboom, was kind of the heir to the Andrew Whitworth throne. Started last year, played a couple games, wasn't playing great, and then got injured and missed most of the season. So what are we getting from him coming back from injury? I think you'll get some okay play. I think he'll probably start off a little bit slow, but I think he will be pretty decent for you. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a liability, but he's not going to be some dominant winner on Matthew Stafford's back end. And then between Logan Bruce, Coleman Shelton, and Brian Allen, one of these guys is going to start at right guard. One of them is going to start at center for you. I think Coleman Shelton played a lot of games from this last year, so maybe they'll start off with Brian Allen starting and Logan Bruce at right guard. And if Logan Bruce can't hang, then you'll probably kick Brian Allen back to guard and start Coleman Shelton. Is probably a pretty likely scenario. But either way, whoever ends up starting between Logan Bruce or Coleman Shelton is probably going to be the weak spot of this offensive line. And then Steve Avila and Brian Allen, you're hoping are going to be just pretty decent guys. And that's the issue with this O-line is that, Logan Bruce or Coleman Shelton may end up being a weakness, but you kind of just have a unit of guys that are pretty decent. You don't really have any great guys. You just have some okay guys. So this offensive line is not going to win you games, but it probably won't really cost you games either. So we can kind of take everything into consideration on this offense. I mean, you do have the potential to be a, top 10 unit. I just don't really see that happening. You do also have the potential to bottom out and be a real bottom 5 unit. But I trust Sean McVay and Mike LaFleur. I think they do have enough talent on this roster. They should be well enough coached where I do think you'll get kind of one of the 10th through 18th best offense. Like I think you'll definitely have more than likely a top, half offense. But it's probably not going to be good enough to win you games, especially when we talk about how bad this defense is. As you can see, that's a whole lot of red and orange. So we'll start off with the secondary, which is really, really bad. So you got Jordan Fuller, who's probably your second best player on this defense. And outside of that, you don't got a whole lot. They bring in Ahkello Witherspoon, who was on the Steelers and Niners. He's a pretty decent corner. But he's not, some amazing lockdown, Pat Surtain, Darius Slay. Like, he's a little bit better than league average, corner. Like, you're glad you have him because he's now your best corner, but he's also your best corner, which is a little worrisome. They also got Kobe Durant as their slot corner, who's a pretty decent slot corner. But outside of those two, you just have a whole lot of question marks and what if. It looks like Darian Kendrick will probably start at that other cornerback spot. And Robert Rochelle has played some games for this team before, but there's just not a whole lot of depth. And so when you don't have a whole lot of talent and you don't have a whole lot of depth, that is a bad recipe on defense. And then their other safety spot looks like Russ Yeast is going to be the starter. But you got no depth after him. Maybe Quentin Lake from UCLA starts there. He's not a great athlete, but he's a smart safety. So looking at this secondary, is probably going to be, I think it might be the worst secondary in the league. If not the worst, it's going to be one of the bottom 2 or 3. Like, it is just not a good unit. And you are 1 or 2 injuries away from basically me playing out there, you know what I mean? So I think you're really, really worried about this defense, and maybe they can bring in some more veterans to kind of help this unit, make you a little bit less worried about it. But either way, I'm not looking forward to this secondary as a Rams fan. And then you're really not going to get much help from the linebacking unit either. Ernest Jones is an okay linebacker, but outside of that, these other guys aren't great. Rosaboom graded out pretty okay, PFF, but I still don't think that there's a whole lot of talent in that linebacking room. And yeah, so then you pair a bad secondary with not really good linebacking help and an offensive line that is Aaron Donald away from being the worst unit in the league. Very bad recipe here. So obviously, happy that you still have Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is still obviously one of the top, 10 players in the NFL. But even last year, he took a bit of a step back when all these injuries started piling up. Part of it is he probably just didn't care quite as much. But also, when there's a lot less talent, that means he has to do a lot more. And so, he can win double teams and triple teams, but nobody's going to win those every single time. So that's really going to require these other guys to really step up. And so on the edge, you got Byron Young and Michael Hocht. I don't really know how to say his name. As your two edge pieces. I mean, maybe they will be okay, but at best case scenario, you'd want these guys to be rotational guys, not starting for you. And so expecting them to really win on the edge and win consistently probably won't happen a whole lot. You got Bobby Brown and Marquise Copeland, who will also be interior guys starting off for them. And that's just not a whole lot of talent. Even the depth, you got Kobe Turner and Jonah Williams, who are decent, but there's just not a whole lot of depth on this team. So you just don't have a whole lot of talent on this defensive line outside of Aaron Donald. So you're expecting a lot of these guys to have to step up, which, their jobs are going to be a lot easier because so much focus is going to be on Aaron Donald. But, expecting Bobby Brown to consistently stop the run because, Aaron Donald's not the greatest run defender in the league. So you're expecting him to stop the run. You're expecting, Byron Young to help get after the quarterback. And it's just a lot to expect from not great guys. So that's what I'm saying is this defense is, I think, best case scenario, you have the 25th defense. I think most likely scenario is you're in the 32 to 29 range on defense. And when your offense isn't going to be a top 5 unit or top 10 unit, that's just a recipe for disaster. However, if you do have any optimism about this team, it is this coaching staff. Obviously, you still have Sean McVay here. He's been here for a while. Obviously, was on the Washington team that had Jake Gruden and Kyle Shanahan and Mike LaFleur and Mike McDaniel and Bobby Slowick was there. Even Raheem Morris, their defensive coordinator, was there. And so you still trust Sean McVay. He's a good coach, and when things are going right, they really go right. However, we've seen from this team when things go wrong, they really go wrong and they bottom out. So, I mean, you trust him, but I think he doesn't always give his teams the highest floor, but he does give them really high ceilings. And then Michael LaFleur, Matt LaFleur's brother, is coming in from the Jets. Yet again, though, it's still Sean McVay's offense, and maybe he'll help, design a better, running game and some of that stuff and help get these weapons more involved. But, it's really Sean McVay's offense still. Then you got Raheem Morris, who might have the toughest job in the NFL this year, just because he has to scheme up a very untalented defense. And while I do think he's a decent coach, you can only polish a turd so much. So now we'll kind of look at their schedule real quick. So your first 6 games, really rough. And then you have to go against Pittsburgh, to Dallas, to Green Bay. So I think before your bye week, I think best case scenario, you're at 3 or 4 wins, but you're probably at 1, 2, maybe 3. So it's just a really rough way to start your schedule. However, if you are able to steal some of these games early, the back half of your schedule does lighten up. After the bye, you have Seattle coming home. You have to go to Arizona. You have Cleveland coming to your home. You have Washington coming to your home. You have New Orleans coming to your home. To the Baltimore Ravens, to the Giants, and to the Niners, which are not easy games at all. But if you're, at a spot heading to your bye week where you're at, 4 or 5 wins, this is definitely an easier back half of the schedule that you could threaten to make the playoffs in. However, I think they're going to be, at 1 or 2 wins. So I think no matter what they really do at the back end, I just don't think there's enough time for them to come back from that. Especially if Week 18 you have to go to San Francisco to really fight and compete for a playoff spot. I think that is a very tough ask to do. So their Vegas line is at 7.5 wins. I am pretty confidently taking the under. I really don't see a 8 or 9 win football team. I think maybe best case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can maybe see them getting to 7, but this being an 8 or even 9, 10, having more than 8 wins to me just doesn't seem very likely. Even as a guy that trusts Sean McVay, I think, yeah, I see them being at, 6 or 7 wins. But them having 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 wins just to me is a very tough ask for a really okay offense and a bad defense. So we'll kind of recap what I said real quick. So obviously, can the coaching kind of overcome how much talent you're lacking, especially on the defensive end? Um, I think they got some good coaches. However, I'm just not sure their coaching is going to be able to have this team overperform as much as you need it to overperform. And then also, kind of what are we getting from Stafford? Is he going to be healthy? It's kind of TBD. I think he'll be okay for you, but you never know, especially as he's older. And then obviously we got Kupp, Donald, and not much else, especially on the defensive end. It's Aaron Donald or bust. And so I think you're going to end up having a horrible defense. It's just not a good recipe for a defense when you have a good safety, an okay linebacker, two okay corners, and Aaron Donald. I think there's a lot of holes in that defense and a lot of places they can be attacked. However, they are able to get out of their tough early schedule with a couple wins. The back half of their schedule is a lot easier, and so they could steal a couple games and maybe fight for a playoff spot. I just don't think that's very likely, though. So with that being said, 28 Rams. Let me know where I'm wrong about this team. Let me know where I'm right about this team. Appreciate y'all very much for watching. Thank y'all very much.